Hi, welcome back to another episode of Traipsing through the Tombstones. In this episode, we're going to talk about some notable people who are buried in Springdale Cemetery who have connections to Peoria and did some interesting things in their lives. The first person we're going to talk about is former Governor Thomas Ford. He was governor, the 8th governor of Illinois from 1842 to 1846. Prior to that, he had served in the Black Hawk War as a spy. He was also a judge in the 6th and 9th Illinois Circuit Courts and on the Illinois Supreme Court before he was elected as governor. His involvement in the Illinois Mormon expulsion was and remains pretty controversial. He married his wife, Frances Hambaugh, and they had 5 children, 3 daughters, 2 sons. He was a public servant, but he really never had much money. So when he died at the age of 49 in 1850 of tuberculosis, he was buried in a pauper's grave. His wife had died just 2 weeks before he did of stomach cancer, and so they were buried in a pauper's grave in the city cemetery. Some people raised money for an 18-foot obelisk to mark their grave, and that was broken in a storm in 1858, so only 8 years after he died. When Springdale Cemetery opened in 1857, that gave new opportunity for people to reinter their dead, and Governor Ford and his wife were moved here in 1860, and a new monument was erected.
Currently, I'm standing at the gravesite of Dr. George Zoller. Dr. Zoller might be well known in the Peoria area, but I don't know if many people realize how well known he is. Dr. Zoller was actually instrumental in the field of treatment for those that were confined to asylums. He actually abolished the use of restraints and other methods of torture for people who were living in these institutions. He was a real advocate for those that were confined there. He and his staff actually were among the first to treat the people in asylums like people. They weren't just animals that needed to be caged. And it was really revolutionary for the time, really. Dr. Zoller was the superintendent of the Peoria State Hospital for many, many years, and he was actually born in Spring Bay, just across the river in Tazewell-Woodford area, and he died at the age of 79 years old. He and his wife are buried here. They were also the donators of Jubilee State Park, so they were really good and proactive people for caring about others and their society.
Now I'm in Sunset Terrace at the gravesite of Jonathan Boyce Taylor, better known as Steel Arm Johnny. He was born in 1870 in North Carolina, the son of a freed slave. And he was the second of 4 brothers, all of whom played professional baseball. He was dubbed Steel Arm Johnny when he was pitching for Biddle University in 1898. The Charlotte Observer, a white newspaper, saw a game, and the writer dubbed him Steel Arm Johnny because of his exceptional pitching speed. He went on to pitch for teams in Birmingham, St. Paul, Chicago, St. Louis, Indianapolis, all over. His pitching career, his professional baseball career spanned over 20 years, both as a player and as a manager. He sometimes played on the same team as his brothers when their paths crossed. His connection to Peoria is that he was a player manager of the Peoria Black Devils of the Negro Leagues in 1920. He died in 1956. I'm not quite sure what brought him back to Peoria in 1956, since he was only here in 1920 before then. I don't think a lot is known about him. His grave was unmarked until 2007, when efforts of the Negro Leagues Baseball Grave Marker Project and a lot of local community organizations raised money to purchase a stone for him. So now he has a nice marker here that notes that he was a pitcher and manager in the Negro Leagues.
I'm currently standing in the Glen section of Springdale Cemetery at the gravesite of Moses and Lucy Pottengill, and this name might sound familiar to you if you've been in the Peoria area for a while, or you're familiar with the Peoria Historical Society and their doings, especially around Christmas. If you've heard of the Pottengill Moran House, the Pottengill part of the Pottengill Moran House refers to Moses and Lucy. It was their second home in Peoria up on Moss Avenue. So the thing about the Pottengills is they were born in New Hampshire and came and settled into Peoria, where Moses became a very prominent and wealthy businessman. He actually traveled a lot and was involved in a lot of different organizations and a lot of different businesses. But most importantly is he and Lucy were very heavily involved with the anti-slavery movement. They were very staunch abolitionists. They helped found with their church the Peoria Anti-Slavery Society. And their first home, not the one on Moss Avenue, but their first home, which was actually down near where the Peoria Civic Center currently is, was actually a stop on the Underground Railroad. Now, this was recently commemorated with these new markers here that they were part of the Underground Railroad. Moses and Lucy had 2 children. Unfortunately, both of them died at a very young age, and they were originally interred in the city cemetery and later moved to Springdale after the death of Lucy.